community of interest models. We've been excited to announce this at the leadership program, and we're looking forward to sharing more information about these new models. These are the result of over 2 years of research, reflection, and listening to the concerns and suggestions from STC members and leaders. So I want to thank everyone who has served on the SIG task force who worked on this, and the members of the CAC as well. So we're really looking forward to sharing this all with you today. Just want to give you guys kind of a heads up what we're going over. As Aaron mentioned, we are recording this and we'll be sharing this on the CAC website. So if you have to drop off or if you want to share it with anyone else, it'll be available online. Since Todd mentioned we're going to be doing this in the webinar format, we want to have this recording be easy to follow for those who weren't on the call. So we're asking you to save your questions and answers for the Q&A at the end. Alternatively, there is a Q&A tool here in Zoom, so you're welcome to submit a question, and when we get to the Q&A, we'll make sure to answer it to the best of our ability. And if you have anything like small or just clarification, feel free to post in the chat. If you do want to chat to everyone who's on the call, make sure you choose all panelists and attendees from that little drop down. Otherwise, you'll just be sending private messages to Todd, Aaron, and I, which we don't mind, but might not be your intention. If you have any questions that come up that are specific to your community, we're looking forward to speaking with all of our SIG managers individually or individually by SIG following this. So don't worry that we don't expect you to have any answers or plans at this point. We're just looking forward to sharing the overview. So, take it away, Todd.
Oh, well, hey, so where we are? Where are we? What are the new models? Well, we're going to get that in just a minute, but we want to recognize to everyone out there that many of our communities have operated at an elevated level of activity for many years and deliver a full experience to all the members. We want to recognize them, for providing all the services and activities that allow, also communities with simpler offerings room to grow. So that's our intention. We want to thank also a lot of the people that have been working behind the scenes in the last couple of years, as Bethany mentioned, who kind of have worked with the SIG task force, where we collected information, we got shared experiences to help define this path forward, as a collaborative effort. So this model is a result of that information and gathering and working with other people and experiences to kind of come and make sure we reflect appropriately and listen to the concerns and suggestions that members of the communities and their leaders have had as well. So the new models, what are they? Well, we're going to be implementing a new model for SIGs that strengthen the role of the communities and improve the services that we can offer. So we're changing a name change and a bit of branding and a differentiation by presenting our SIGs as communities of practice. So we can strengthen the offerings of the communities and ensure that there's a more consistent member experience overall for all STC members. And that's one of the bigger goals of this initiative. So this will constitute a professional learning strategy for members and serve as a vehicle for more authentic communication, continuing of mentoring and growth. And of course, we're proud of the vital, vibrant SIGs that we have who offer the regular programming, the educational resources, and mentoring to those members. And for these SIGs that are active in doing all these things, becoming a community of practice will not require any significant changes to current structure or operation today. So instead, we kind of see this as an opportunity to help recruit members and to drive engagement going forward. And as part of that, we also recognize that some SIGs, need a little more space to grow and meet the requirements of an active SIG today, and have some, challenges doing that under the current model, which can, be burdensome if there's lack of volunteers or leaders or other, issues that can come up. So to address that within this new model, we're allowing for the formation of communities of interest with a lighter, leaner offerings than a full community of practice or COP. Next slide, please. All right. So what do these things kind of look like, and how are we trying to define them? So we recognize that the development in the future of STC lies with the communities and our members. They're one of our greatest strengths as an organization. And as such, we want to nurture them and provide the tools required to succeed. So with the special interest groups bringing together members that have passion for various facets of technical communication in the different categories that we have and the different communities, we recognize and understand they share the knowledge and build practices to enhance the expertise of the members who belong to those communities or SIGs. So beyond technical communication, we now are going to be using the term community of practice and community of interest to describe these activities going forward, and painting a picture of the experienced members, all members who want to join these communities can expect. So essentially, the communities of practice are more or less the same as the SIGs today, that, with active leaders and volunteers, the regular programming and education options they bring, and the steady member engagement and communication that happens today. The communities of interest are a little less, or more less formalized groups, and that can still share a common passion for a particular topic or subject area, but they may not yet have the necessary volunteers or leaders or resources to fulfill the more vigorous or rigorous requirements of a community practice or SIG today for its members. So what are some of the benefits that we hope that these changes will bring? Well, a bigger picture wise, we hope and expect that this will get energized member engagement overall, because we're going to have very clearer and more consistently defined, let's call them definitions of what these communities are and what those members can expect. We're also going to make it easier for new communities to grow or get established based on certain topics that may come up, that we're not thinking about, or that may just come up unexpectedly. And of course, providing a consistent member experience is a big part of this overall plan that we want to do for STC with that engagement. And part of, as we work to roll out, and some details we will share and other details that need to be worked out a little bit, is we're working towards building a broader STC community inclusion and platform that is similar and consistent across different levels of communities. And of course, for a lot of our leaders and the volunteers who really put in so much, or the heart, and they put in so much effort, we want to work to make reducing the overhead and administration of those communities easier. So that's, really what we're going for, and embracing this change will foster, we hope and expect, a consistent experience for all members, the improved, communications that are more centralized and, similar. We're going to reduce that overhead and, hopefully burn out by being allowed and making it easier to draw new volunteers and reduce that complexity. And we hope that this is also, a means of reinvigorating a lot of current SIGs, future COPs or COIs, by, having very clear definitions of the purpose, structure, and requirements of those communities going forward.
All right, so what's changing? As Todd's mentioned, for the SIGs who meet the definition for a community of practice, the only change really is rebranding the special interest group to community of practice and submitting an updated charter to the Community Affairs Committee in the STC office, which I'll be going over. We understand this change will take time. Currently, our goal is to complete this by the end of July, ahead of the 2020-2021 membership season, and I'll go more into what those dates look like ahead. So basically, we're trying to get this all set for the member sign-up process, which is coming ahead. It's on September 1st, and I know Donnell put in the chat a question about the logo or website, all referring to SIGs. We're encouraging you to use the new language once the membership season opens, so referring to yourselves as a community of practice or community of interest, whichever is the model that your community falls under. And if there are rebranding changes that need to occur in the future, such as like website, URL, social media addresses, that's currently not under any of our requirements, but we're happy to work with you on that. And we also are planning to have a COP/COI open house this summer. I know at the STC Summit, normally there would be a space for the SIGs to recruit members and have a booth. So we're planning to recreate that in a virtual forum to give you the chance to appeal directly to members, explain what your community has to offer, and hopefully encourage some new volunteers. So we look forward to communicating more about that open house in the coming month. Just to quickly go over the financial impact. For the COPs, there's going to be no changes for funding. All of the fees for your community will be the same as under the SIG model. So whatever that means for that specific membership level, that's what it'll cost to join your community. You are eligible for funding, and there will be no changes to the budget process. So that will all follow exactly as it has before. For the SIGs that are the COIs, They will be free for all members. They'll just simply have to register as part of the member sign up process, but they will not be eligible for funding. So that's going to be a bit of a change for any communities that fall under that model. Just to kind of go over the requirements. Uh, the COPs are required to have a charter, and as we mentioned before, there's going to be a rechartering process just to make sure everything's up to date and follows the new criteria. We've got a little more specificity, so it'll be easier to define what each of our communities has to offer. There'll be 2 leaders. We have listed an active communication forum. I'll get more into what we're kind of looking at there, but I think for most of our existing communities, we already have either use of social media platform or a tool like Slack or something like that to communicate with your members. You do need to have regular meetings, which we defined as 4 at least per year, which would be 1 per quarter. Some form of regular outreach, whether that's a newsletter or some other additional communication to your members, just keeping in contact with them. And curated content, so some sort of information you're hosting about your domain. So that's something that can be shared with the STC community at large. For the COIs, we're keeping it much more streamlined. Instead of a charter, they'll complete an application, which has simpler criteria, and they're required to have 1 facilitator. For their communication, we're requiring that they use a Slack channel, which will be part of a broader Slack, which I'll mention on an upcoming slide. For SIGs that have no manager, and as we move forward in the process this summer of trying to identify leaders, if no one steps up, those would become inactive for the coming membership year. So that would be something we would evaluate in the coming month, and I'll go over on an upcoming slide, but that's just what would happen if we don't have someone who's going to take the reins and lead that community forward. So for Community Slack Workspace, I think for those who were on the annual business meeting, you saw there was a motion from Shri about centralizing a Slack that would be available to all STC members. We are planning on doing a centralized Slack for the community, so there's a current community Slack available, and we did work on defining a new Slack workspace that would be available for the communities of practice and communities of interest. We're currently evaluating how we can centralize those workspaces so we don't have a scattered Slack situation. So look forward to providing more information to that once we've evaluated that. But regardless, we are planning to have channels in the Slack that we settle on for the COPs and COIs that would be specific to those members. So it would be private for members who are in those communities and a place to chat, but also there will be channels available for leaders across communities to communicate, which kind of goes to that point of Todd had about fostering a broader sense of community, because we know there's a lot of opportunities for leaders to share experiences and knowledge, and we want to make sure we're giving a forum for that besides, just having to go directly to a person through email. So what's the rollout plan? As I mentioned before, the communities of practice and communities of interest will be announced to the membership at large as part of the membership season, which will open up September 1st. So I know we announced it at Leadership Day, but it's not being broadly promoted up until it's part of the membership season. The implementation of this new structure will begin now, and we're planning to complete it by the end of July 2020 to ensure the STC office can make the changes necessary to support that in the membership process, and also to promote the model and your community for the next membership cycle. And while we're going to use the terms community of practice, community of interest for member signups, we encourage you to use that as well. As I mentioned before, we're not requiring you to change your domain or update your email addresses or anything like that. We're not expecting you to do that administrative change right now. So just to briefly show the new updated charter previously, this was a Word document that was sent to the STC office and the Community Affairs Committee and housed there. Instead, now we're going to be using a charter form, which is available through Google Forms that can be completed. So that would need to be completed by the 31st of July 2020. All of the existing SIGs will need to complete these new community practice charters as part of that process by the end of July, as I mentioned. And I do have a link to share the form now, so you're welcome to view it. I do want to mention that we're looking forward to meeting with each of the SIG managers to go through this process and kind of evaluate how your community is doing with you, see if you've met all the criteria, or if there's areas where you need our help, making sure you're prepared for this. Or if you're in a community that looks like maybe the COI model is better, we can talk through that with you as well. And then take a look at the application for the community of interest. It's a very similar form, but there's a lot less structure around it. It's more simplified. It's just requiring the 1 facilitator, like I mentioned before, but this will follow the same timeline and need to be completed by the 31st of July of this year so that we can make sure these changes are in place for the membership season in the fall.
All right, well, my turn. So I'm going to just talk briefly a little bit, slightly more specifically about how this is going to work. Again, as Bethany mentioned, we're going to work individually with, the individual SIG leaders and walk through the process and evaluate things and make sure that, everyone's understands and knows what's expected. And, we can, if there's, some places where we can help support in the quick interim to get to the place to more clearly define which model works out best, we're going to do that as well. So for the community of practice, this is, intended for, any SIG today that is really, as we kind of mentioned earlier, that's currently active and meets most of the standard criteria of having, the right leadership, volunteers, and the level of activity. And the SIGs that meet these requirements will become the communities of practice. So that's the language, we've mentioned we're going to be using going forward. And those communities are going to be eligible for the SDC members to join at the same $10 a year membership fee level as it was today. They'll just be sort of the labeling change a little bit once members look to sign up for those communities. So any of the SIGs today that qualify as a community of practice should continue, and they're expected to continue offering the current levels of benefits and activities. The COPs, we want to make sure that everyone's, keeping on top of everything and following along and transitioning and working. So we don't want things to go, by the wayside. So we're going to require rechartering every 2 years, starting with the initial charter here in the next, 2 months as we move into the new model. So that makes sure everyone's current, nothing kind of, falls by the wayside. So, and of course, highly active community of interest that, start up have an opportunity to kind of graduate to a community of practice, and they may like to do so, provided they, of course, meet the communities of practice requirements and complete the, higher level chartering process. Any CO communities of interest that, may be deprecated or discontinued, if there isn't any recurring or regular activity for an extended period of time in the discussion channel or board. We're still working out, we don't have a specifics on what that means as far as what level or, time of activity, but something that's reasonable so that things don't just sit out there and then from the member experience, it looks like there's nobody participating. So that's something we're looking to avoid as well. So for the community's interest, any, the SIGs today that are, maybe not as active or kind of have had some challenges of, keeping up with either the level of volunteers they need or the level of activity, and they can't meet the community practice requirements, they can complete as Bethany mentioned, a much more streamlined application to become a community of interest. And these communities of interest, once they're established just ahead of the membership season, will be available for every SDC member to select. Of course, all members will be, managed through the process. You can't just join ad hoc. It's through the membership cycle, so that registration is required. And the COIs that have web presence, well, it'll mainly consist of the channel on the broader community Slack. So just, something to kind of note here is, all communities are still going to be expected to self-evaluate on a regular basis and complete a self-assessment every 6 months to ensure that, the members of those communities are receiving the benefits and level of activity they expect throughout the year. And of course, the Community Affairs Committee, the CAC, is here and, we'll be completing an annual assessment of the communities to make sure activity prior to membership renewal season is sufficient to determine the right community model and that they're meeting the expectations and the requirements established in the charter. And as far as any inactive SIGs, we recognize that SIGs, many of them have been around a long time. They have a lot of great leaders and members, and they have people there with a lot of commitment and passion, shared experience, and keep them together as long as members are active and engaged and interact and can learn from each other. However, those that may not have had recent activity or they don't have leaders that are engaged and committed to participate and engage for the coming year, those will become inactive and they won't be eligible for members to join during that membership season. But of course we recognize things, ebb and flow, and that there are periods where an inactive SIG may wish to restart. They may find new leaders and volunteers and have a plan of action going forward to meet the criteria. Of course, during that process, as that happens, the CAC will support their charter application to become either a COI or a COP in the upcoming season. So we're still working on the process for archiving those communities and SIGs that more or less are more dormant. So we still have some some details to work out in that way. So again, we're going to be working with, as mentioned, all the SIG leaders in the next few weeks to walk through these models, the community of practice and interest process and rechartering. So we're going to work with them to help identify, recruit, and engage the leaders and volunteers to help manage and grow their communities. So this is what we're asking communities to do in the coming weeks. So you just know if you're a member of the SIG, what we're going to be working with them to do. And we ask that the CAC is here to support them, and we ask that you help manage and reach out to them if they have questions or some needs from your side as well. And so the next steps that are coming is, as I mentioned, we're going to be meeting with the current SIG leaders to discuss the process and the application and the charter to make sure everyone's comfortable and understands what's expected, and we can work to sort through any questions there. We're going to confirm the models by the end of July so that we can get everything kind of in shape, because as Bethany mentioned, there is a lot of things that have to happen behind the scenes with the STC systems and processing to get all that ready so that when we're set to go by September 1st for members to, correctly sign up and select the communities that we're going to be offering in the coming year. And then here's just a link to some of the resources here. So you can get, again, primarily a lot of this will be with the SIG leaders and volunteers, but as a member, if of interest here in this, we're just providing some of this information for a little bit of understanding of what's expected and what some of the requirements are. And also we'll be offering a PDF of this slide deck, so you kind of have an overview of some of the major points.
Okay, thank you, Todd.
Thank you.
So just to reiterate, the changes for most of our communities are going to be mostly kind of branding and defining the structure. And this new model is intended to help develop and support our dynamic communities and reduce any administrative overhead that's required for SIGs who need more support. So I think we're ready for questions. Aaron, were you going to read out questions? Oh, Aaron, I think you're muted.
Well, I can open. I see the panel too.
I think she's ready.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Let's see. Paula Robertson asked, is it mandatory to use Slack?
Great question. We figured this would come up, but I know we didn't go into too much detail on the Slack. For communities of practice, we are not requiring you to use Slack. We were intending to set up a Slack channel, so there'll be a centralized hub that will list every community. But if your community uses a different forum for communication, we would just have a link there to direct people to where they should go. For the communities of interest, we would be requiring them to use the community Slack so that there is a centralized place for them to go and for us to be able to, not just keep an eye on things, but help support and encourage conversation and not have to, deal with different tools for those communities that have a lighter model.
Okay, good. Donnell asked, the 4+ meetings, do webinars count, or do they need to be member meetings?
Our intention was that any meetings would count, including webinars. So any event or opportunity you're hosting for your members to engage with educational opportunities or networking or anything that's particular to what your community has to offer would qualify. So webinars would be great.
Great. Okay. Ben asked, for SIGs considering changing to a COI, what needs to be done about curating current content?
So I guess Todd might have kind of answered this after Ben asked, but I guess Todd, do you want to kind of, repeat?
Yeah, we're going to definitely make sure that we don't lose information that we can. We don't have a particular specific solution at the moment of what we will do with the content, but we will make sure that nothing do our best to archive as much as possible, make sure we have that material and content available, because again, on the flip side, a community may decide that they want to ramp back up, and we'll make sure that that's kind of available. I think during the process, we'll try to find a forum or a vehicle to provide some of that information. It may be through, we're open to suggestions and ideas too. I think we don't have a specific plan for that, but we do know that we will collect the information and make sure that nothing gets dropped or lost, and that we have the opportunity to work with volunteers or somebody else to repurpose that information. That we know that there's a lot of stuff. It's a little off topic, but for the body of knowledge, there's a lot of good things that, there may be content that's suitable for moving and getting into that as well, that can be linked to that particular area of our topic.
Thanks, Todd.
Okay. Next question is from Karen. Reinstatement of inactive COIs can happen only once per year, or only at a certain time or times per year, or whenever they want to go through the reinstatement process. I guess it's a question of our overall.
What is the timeline?
Exactly.
We had originally intended that this would only be done annually, so it would be on the sort of preparation for the next membership cycle. I know we had some future discussion that maybe there should be another point earlier, before maybe January, where there could be another opportunity for reinstatement. So we'll define that soon and let you guys know. But it wouldn't be on a monthly basis or anything like that, because there is work behind the scenes that needs to happen to make sure members would actually be able to register.
Okay, and the next question was a follow-up from Paula, and this is something that we'll look into. She stated that the COI application is saying no longer accepting entries, so we may just want to take a
Yes, I could answer that. I actually did that yesterday because I wanted to make sure the forms were available so you could look at them, but I didn't want to start receiving applications yet, since we haven't had a chance to meet with the SIG leaders. So that's by intention. I was planning to open them probably later this week, after we've had a chance to speak to any managers or anyone who's looking to start a new community of interest. So those will be available, and we'll let you know.
Perfect. Okay, and Laura asked, do we know at this time which SIGs will be COPs and which will be COIs?
So the Community Affairs Committee did do an initial evaluation to kind of determine which SIGs we thought would fall under community practice or community of interest. But really what it comes down to is, if we have someone who's already planning to be a leader for next year, those would definitely be communities of interest who have activity, robust web presence, regular member activities. Those would definitely be communities of practice. We're seeing the community of interest model would more fall for the SIGs currently who are either lacking a leader or looking for new leadership because someone's looking to step down. So that might be where that falls. Of course, there's always the chance that someone will step up and that will continue as a community of practice. So we haven't, we don't have a definitive list. We're still kind of in the evaluation period. We want to talk to the current leaders to make sure, we understand where everyone is going to end up.
Right, and I'll just follow up on that. So this is also an opportunity if you're kind of on, let's say, a marginal SIG that's kind of in a transitional period or looking into the year ahead. We expect there to be a dedicated commitment from somebody and a group of the people into the coming year. But if that's looking a little uncertain, this is the time that we want to make sure that we understand that and try to work with the communities and help to make sure we're recruiting to find those people to carry things forward as best we can into the new season. So that's part of this call too, is from the people that are on this webinar as well, who aren't just SIG leaders who will be working with, you may be asked to help support, nominate, find people that can really help contribute, especially some of the ones that the SIGs that might need a little more help to maintain and stay at a COP level.
Okay, and our next question comes from Marianne. Will COPs be eligible for Community Achievement Awards?
Yes, we were intending there was no change to that. Those SIGs would still be eligible for Community Achievement Awards through the same process. There would be no changes to that process whatsoever. We look forward to seeing, our communities of practice be recognized for their achievements, same as always. So that's all the questions I see so far. Feel free to add any more, either I guess in the chat or through the Q&A tool. We're happy to answer them. Appreciate you all being patient. For those who joined later, again, please accept my apologies for the link error. As I've mentioned, it will haunt me for many days to come, but I anticipate earning your forgiveness in the future.
No, thanks everybody for attending and joining us again. We hope this was, informative. Again, this was intended as an overview, just, to broaden, the expectations from a lot of the community leaders overall, and the volunteers are really engaged to kind of know what's happening and what's, be expected here in the coming weeks. But, the CAC, the CAC looks forward to working with all the individual people and the leaders to kind of, walk through it, define it, and take advantage of this we really see this as a way of consolidating and making it a very consistent, clear understanding from the members, the leaders, the volunteers of, what these things are, and allowing for flexibility and some, understanding that, communities ebb and flow. And, we really hope that, and look forward to your, input or feedback as we, work through it. We still have some details, but we're really, optimistic and feel good about this as an idea and a model for STC as a whole, for members of communities and the members overall, improving that experience and consistency. So
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not seeing any further questions. So we're not ending questions, of course, going forward. If you have anything that comes to mind later, we will be reaching out to our SIG managers. But if you're currently a member or you're just interested or you have questions, please feel free to email the Community Affairs Committee at cac@stc.org, or Erin Galley, and Erin Galley. Keep Erin in the loop since she's our Community and Membership Director. I'm going to get Erin's
Director of Membership and Community Relations, but you guys know who I
Okay.
am.
Yes, Erin is
You
our
find
go-to
me.
person for the STC office who's helping us through all of this. So please feel free to reach out at any time. And just a final plug, Todd.
Oh, yeah. So tomorrow night, we're going to keep up, just have a casual social to kind of build out what we, did at the leadership program. It's really just a meet and greet, just say hi, introduce yourselves again. As we have some newer people that don't know each other. So a lot of it's just kind of pop on, say who you are, and, bring a drink or whatever beverage you might want, just a casual, no business conducted. We're just gonna keep continuing to get to know each other. We recognize there is another event at the same time. We didn't want to move that around to avoid and confuse and, make people choose. We'll be doing it again. This is just more of a kind of a kickoff towards, continuing the social and the interaction of having all our leaders and community leaders just getting to know and casually meet again. We know that there's lots of meetings out there and other kinds of things. We're going to work to make sure that we coordinate that with communities going forward and other things that are offering, and work to also expand that so that we improve the promotion of what you guys are doing to each other. So this is a start in that direction, and we understand, unfortunately, some people may not be able to make that, but we're going to do it again pretty soon so that we kind of get on a more regular cadence with that as well.
Yeah, if you are going to another event, we'll be doing these in the future. So, Todd only improves over time, so each time, it'll be an even better
We've learned
experience.
some lessons.
So,
Yes, we didn't, know what some other things that were going on.
yeah,
So
so
we
no worries if you're
apologize
going to
for
something
that.
else.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. I appreciate your questions and your time and your patience, and we look forward to working with a lot of you to get this rolled out this summer. So I hope you all have a great evening, and thank you again for joining us.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.